Hey everyone, I'm here with Dr. Amie Hornaman, the thyroid expert. I'm so happy to have you here on the show with us. Welcome.
Thanks, Danny. I'm happy to be here.
I am excited to dive into thyroid because as we were talking a little bit off air, I have my own set of thyroid issues, and a lot of people I see who have blood sugar issues, as I'm sure you get in your practice, also have thyroid issues. And a good piece of the news is that a lot of times when we work really deeply on blood sugar and insulin, a lot of people get to come off their thyroid meds or reduce the dosage, which I'm sure we could talk about that link there and why that might be happening. But for some people like me, where my blood sugar is really dialed in, I'm still struggling. So we need to get to the root of why that is. So I usually like to start with my guest stories. And so I'd love to start with your own journey and how you got to where you are today.
Absolutely. So very similar to your story of dealing with your own health and bringing you into a certain specialty. Same thing, pain to purpose story for me. This is going back 20 some odd years. I was a figure competitor. So for those of you who don't know, there's bodybuilding where you look kind of, big and bulky, and some women look like guys, but then there's figure. And that's where, at least back in the early 2000s, that is where in late 90s, women still look like women. You just wanted to be athletic and toned, but the diet regimen leading up to a show, up to a competition was very, very strict. So it was very much focused on clean foods and, chicken, broccoli, asparagus, fish. Sometimes you're hitting the gym twice a day, not necessarily a good thing for you, but that was the regimen. And I had done many of those before. So I would diet down for a photo shoot, for a show, the same way each time. And, with little tweaks here and there, but it would always work. I would always lose the weight and get in shape. This one particular time I was getting ready for the NPC Pittsburgh show, kind of a bigger show, a lot of competitors, and the scale was going up instead of down. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? This doesn't even make sense based on what I'm eating and how I'm working out. So I did what we all do. I went to my doctor. Now this is, remember, before I got into functional medicine. So I'm going in like a newbie. I'm going in not knowing anything about anything, just saying, why the hell am I gaining weight? I mean, I knew nutrition. I was in the nutrition space, but I wasn't in the functional medicine space. So I go to first doctor, says, you're normal, everything's fine. And I leave there. I'm like, well, wait a minute. That doesn't sound right. I don't feel normal or fine at all. So, you wait a little bit. Weight keeps going up. Fatigue is creeping on. Hair loss is happening. Doctor number two says, just eat less and exercise more. I'm like, do you know what I'm eating, right? Do you even listen to me? Of course not. No, they're not. And then the medical gaslighting continued to where I heard you're just getting older. I was in my 20s. I heard it's all in your head, medical gaslighting. And that was 6 doctors that all misdiagnosed me. And I often stop and think, what if I would have stopped at doctor number 3? What if I would have stopped at doctor number 5? So 6 docs misdiagnosed me. It wasn't until the 7th doctor actually touched my throat and said, swallow. Said, well, you have a goiter. It looks like you have Hashi. Here's a pill. So I left her office. I was like, yeah, I got a pill. I'm going to lose weight now. This is awesome. She put me on T4. Now, I didn't know at the time, but that doesn't work. T4 only doesn't work. I gave it 5 months, not 1 pound lost. I wasn't feeling better. Nothing. So I start doing my own research and I joke on my gateway computer. Now, mind you, I can laugh about this now, but I was in a total state of depression. I mean, I cried in my car. I was just praying to God that something was wrong with me. I didn't even care what it was. You could have told me I had cancer. I'd been like, well, at least there's a freaking answer, right? So doctor number 8 was my functional doctor. That he became my mentor and brought me into this space that I'm in now because he did everything that I do now. Looked at supplements, looked at all of the labs, We changed my medication to not be on T4 only. We went to NDT, and then he was open enough to use T4 and T3. And then it turns out I'm a non-converter. So we went to T3 only. The whole journey that he was by my side the whole time, looking at all the different factors, looking at insulin, looking at blood sugar, looking at how I'm eating. And we laid all of that out to a very effective treatment plan that actually got me optimized. And from that point, that was my career changing moment that said, if I just went through that frustration, and I was in a major city too, I was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I mean, we have a huge healthcare network down there. UPMC pretty much runs the city. I couldn't even get proper medical care. I couldn't even get an answer. So I thought, if I can't, how many other people out there can't? How many other people are struggling with these symptoms that I struggled with? And I at least know a thing or two about the body. Right. And so that's what led me into functional medicine, specializing in the thyroid, specializing in hormones.
I love it. And I, like you said at the beginning, so many parallels to your journey and how that anger of like, this is not only happening to me, the doctors with all this medical gaslighting, like what is happening? And I knew a ton about nutrition at that point because I had already healed a lot of stuff in my journey. So I wasn't new to this, but I couldn't believe how much I still didn't know, even after trying to know this information. And so we're just not taught this information. We don't hear about stuff about thyroid, about blood sugar, but also our doctors, the people we're turning to, also don't know how to effectively help us. And then because they don't know, a lot of people think that there's no hope. I'm just broken. I'm going to have to be on medications. The medications don't help. And then you get into a really, really dark place of hopelessness. And that's really what I think you and I are trying to save people from, because we've been there. We've been depressed and being like, I'm doing everything right, quote unquote, and nothing's happening. So I love that we're fighting this fight together and helping people all over so they don't have to struggle like we did.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So let's just start with some symptoms. So would you say are some common symptoms that you see every day that would indicate that someone is very likely dealing with some thyroid stuff?
Yes. So the big
because,
ones,
because how many times have you heard someone say, my doctor tested my thyroid and it's fine, right? So it can't be my thyroid, and they test the one marker TSH. And right. So sorry for interrupting. What would you say those big symptoms are?
So there are the big ones that we see pretty much across the board. And then we can even get into these little ones that a lot of people won't even think is thyroid related, but it can be, since the thyroid is the master gland. So the big ones: weight gain and inability to lose weight. That's a biggie. Now, there's a very small percentage of thyroid patients that don't have the weight component. And my goodness, God bless them, right? They don't have to deal with that, but they will have the fatigue and the hair loss and the constipation, anxiety and depression, loss of the outer corner of your eyebrows, hair, like I mentioned, hair loss, but it can also be very much hair thinning. Your hair gets very straw-like because the nutrients can't get to the hair shaft. And then we can have joint pain, frozen shoulder. Those are the weird ones that people will be like, oh, well, I just thought it was overuse. My executive assistant, she was a patient first, and she actually told me after the fact, she's like, did you know that when I started working with you, she goes, I didn't even think of this as a thyroid symptom, but she couldn't hold a pen. Her joints hurt so badly. She just thought it was arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis. And when we started treating her thyroid, all the pain went away in her joints. So that can be another big factor. And then dysregulation of blood sugar. 95 to 99% of hypothyroid Hashimoto patients had dysregulated insulin and blood sugar. So we'll see that go all over the place. We'll see dysregulated lipid panels. And then that's a whole nother discussion on what is high in your cholesterol, dysregulated hormone levels. So it really starts to trickle through the whole body and wreak havoc in a variety of different systems in the body.
Yep. Yeah. And some of these symptoms, I'm sure, are, popping up in people's head like, oh goodness, I might have thyroid issues. So what kinds of labs should you get to see the complete health of your thyroid? Because as I alluded to before, doctors will go in, they'll test your TSH, which is your thyroid stimulating hormone, which the pituitary makes. So it's not even coming from your actual thyroid. And
Right.
then they'll say, no, your thyroid's fine because it'll come out in range. So what are the actual tests that people should be asking their doctors for?
I'm going to give you the test, but before I do, there is
Okay.
a rule that every single one of your listeners must follow. If you ask your doctor for these tests and your doctor says no, it's time to get a new doctor, because these are the tests that you need to get the complete picture. I don't care what excuse they give you. I don't care what kind of BS they throw at you. If they're not going to run the test, there is no way in hell that they will be able to help you, because they don't even care about the full picture of your health. Okay, so I digress. You got into TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. That's the first one. That is standard of care. That is what they learn in med school. You test that. If high, then hypo. But what if it's not high? Or what if it's above the functional range? We like TSH below a 2. What if you're rolling in at a 2.9 or a 3.5? You're going to be told that you're normal by your doctor. You have to look deeper. I used to use this analogy. I haven't used it in a while, so I'll throw it out there again. TSH, this might be a poor analogy, but I love it. Let's say you have a flood in your basement. You got 2 feet of water in your basement. You're like, oh my gosh, we got to call a plumber. What's going on? This is going to ruin things. You call the plumber and your plumber comes in your upstairs and goes to your kitchen and looks in your kitchen sink and goes, yeah, this looks good. I'm going to take off now. You don't have a problem. You're like, wait a minute. I got water in my basement. Let's say the plumber comes in and you have water spewing out of your kitchen sink, hitting the ceiling. He's going to be like, whoa, there's a problem here. Yeah, because it's obvious, right? There's water spewing out of your kitchen sink, hitting the ceiling. It's obvious there's a problem. But if he doesn't go downstairs and there's not water spewing out of your sink, he doesn't know if there's a problem. That is your TSH. If your TSH is screaming, if it's above a 4.5 or whatever the cutoff is on your standard lab value, then your doctor might be like, hey, you might have hypothyroidism. But if it's not screaming and they don't go to the basement and look further, you're not getting help. But meanwhile, there's a huge problem because you got 2 feet of water in your basement. There's a huge problem in your body if they're not looking beyond the TSH. So beyond TSH, and you might get lucky enough that they order a free T4 or maybe a total T4. That's the next step in standard of care. Look at the T4, but T4 is inactive. It is the inactive thyroid hormone. Yeah, it's nice to look at your storage. So whenever the body needs to actually get some thyroid hormone into the system, it pulls the T4 and converts it to T3 and then pushes that out to the cell. So that's just your storage. That's like the gas that's in the tanker truck delivering gas to the sheets, right? To the Citgo, to the 7-Eleven. It's not doing anything while it's in the tanker truck. It doesn't help your car at all, but it's there. So then we move on and we go, let's look at free T3. Free is the unbound form of the hormone. That means it's readily available for your cells to pick up. We want to look at the free T3 because T3 is the active thyroid hormone. So I said earlier, T4 has to convert. T4 is inactive, T3 is active. T4 has to convert to T3 to be active at the cell level. Your cells have receptor sites on them for T3, not T4. So that has to convert. We want to know how much free, unbound, available, active thyroid hormone your cells have to pick up and utilize. Then beyond that, we go to reverse T3. This is a very, very important test. And this is a test that many doctors will not run because they do not think it's valuable. They also don't know how to apply it to what it means with the thyroid because they learn, hey, reverse T3 goes high if someone's in the ER or the ICU. Yeah, it's a survival mechanism. Thank God it's built into our bodies because when you're laying in the ICU or the ER after an injury or a trauma or something, your body wants to survive. So your body knows that it doesn't have to burn fat. You don't have to feel good. You don't have to grow your hair. You just need to survive. So it's going to shut down all metabolic processes in order to conserve energy to heal whatever, if you're broke a bone or you had a heart attack or whatever you're there for, it's going to help your body survive. But we don't want reverse T3 high on a day-to-day basis when we're trying to live life. So that's a really important marker, whether you're on thyroid hormone or not, to have tested to see if your body is in this survival mode. Then we go on, there's two more. Then we go on to TPO and TGA, thyroid peroxidase and thyroglobulin antibodies. That's what tests for Hashimoto's. Now, I didn't get into all of the optimal lab values with each, but I will mention this with the antibodies. A lot of times people will say, well, I don't have Hashimoto's because my antibodies were a 9 and the cutoff is less than 20 or less than 10. Any antibody is an antibody. When you think about antibodies in autoimmune, I want you to think of soldiers. You have these soldiers that are confused and they think, in the case of Hashimoto's, they think your thyroid is a bad guy. It's an invader. And those soldiers like to go out and they like to destroy the bad guy. They're fighting the bad guy. So they're destroying your thyroid gland. What difference does it make if you have 9 soldiers or 25? That's still Hashimoto's. You're still in destruction. You're just not in, obviously, if you have 100 troops versus 9 troops, there's going to be more destruction with 100 guys, right? Versus 9, but there still is destruction with 9. So any antibody is an antibody against your thyroid when we're testing TPO and TGA.
That's really interesting. And I have my own lab values of all of these because a dear friend of both of ours, who was actually the person who connected us, Karen Martell, she was on my show to talk all about hormones. She encouraged me to test my thyroid. And so I do have all these values. So would you be open to, maybe I could share my screen and we can look at them?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. So we'll talk you through it if you're listening on the podcast. So here are all of those tests laid out. So you can let me know what you think after you take a look at them.
Okay, so this is perfect. So you have all of the proper testing done, which that's a huge first step. Now, before we get into the test, can you tell me what are your main symptoms?
So I would say that I have a really hard time losing weight. I would say that that's my predominant symptom. I lost weight when I first went keto back in the day, and I've been able to keep it off, and I really stay at a very certain weight. I always carry a little bit of extra body fat, and I've never been someone who is, I have muscles, but they're under body fat for sure. So my BMI, I think I was at like a 32% body fat. I did a DEXA scan, which is like above where I want to be, let's say. And I always feel like above where I feel like I should be based on how much I take care of my health, right? Where I think this is a lot of thyroid people. It's like, you're not getting the results that you almost deserve to get because you're working so hard, right?
Right.
Yeah. And I would say that my hair has definitely thinned in the past years more than I would expect. Even though I am getting older, I would want my hair to be thinner. And I do always have really thin eyebrows. So I don't know if I don't lose it. I mean, I penciled it in, but I have thin eyebrows. I mean, maybe from over tweezing in the 2000s, but they haven't grown back yet.
We all did that. We all did
it. And mine didn't come back. So maybe that's a sign there. And I have to work really hard to have good energy. So because my lifestyle is so dialed in, I do have good energy, but I feel that I lack resilience. So if I have a night of poor sleep, it takes me like a few days to make up for it. So I feel like things are really good because I work so hard, but I do feel like I don't have that backup tank. I don't have those reserves. One night will take me out. So those are my major, I guess, symptoms.
Perfect. That is a perfect starting point because so many of your listeners probably resonate with that and they're nodding their heads and they're saying yes. So let's say let's first start with what conventional medicine will say. And this is not bashing conventional medicine. This is 26 years of me doing what I'm doing and hearing over and over again, even to this day, in this world of precision medicine, functional medicine, and integrated medicine, I still hear this. Conventional medicine would look at this and say, you're fine. Totally normal, Danielle. Nothing's going on with you.
Yep.
Functional medicine and myself looks at this and says, okay, so let's break this down, especially for the listeners that are listening and not watching. Thyroid peroxidase and thyroglobulin. I go there first and I look there and I see it's not even registering. You are not registering antibodies whatsoever. So it does not appear, and I say appear, it does not appear as if you have Hashimoto's, but the way you take care of yourself, you've probably been gluten-free for a while, right?
Since 2012. So for 10 years, I've been gluten-free. Yeah.
Probably not going to register. So those who have really truly been gluten-free, you might not even register antibodies anymore because gluten is an autoimmune attack mimicker, especially for Hashimoto's. It looks like the thyroid gland. So whenever we consume gluten, and let's say you have Hashimoto's or any autoimmune condition and you consume gluten, you are increasing your antibodies, you're building your troops, you're increasing your soldiers that are destroying your thyroid gland. And every time you eat the gluten, those soldiers go out and they do more and more destruction. So you're building your camp and you're doing additional destruction. We often see, and I was being interviewed by Cynthia Thurlow, and I was so happy when she said this because it backed up what I've been saying for years too. She was like, well, wait, 95% of all hypothyroidism is Hashimoto's. True. And if someone doesn't have antibodies and they've been gluten-free, she says, like I do, like she does, she goes, I know I have Hashimoto's. I just don't have the antibodies because of the way I take care of myself. I'm like, thank you. Bingo. This is what I've been saying for years now, because so often I will see this very pattern of zero. I have zero antibodies. I know I have Hashimoto's. I got psoriasis. Right? It came on after a period of stress. Yeah, it's Hashimoto's, but I'm not registering antibodies. And I guarantee you they didn't test my antibodies way back in the day either, when it would have registered.
Yeah. So I don't have psoriasis, but I do have a history in the past of eczema, allergies, and asthma, which I reversed all of those with diet. So I do have that sort of immune component as well. So I don't know if that's related at all.
It's not really autoimmune. Eczema isn't considered autoimmune, although
like
I guess when you talk to a functional specialist of skin conditions, they'd be like, I don't know. I think eczema is. So it's splitting hairs, but we can say most likely you're not showing antibodies because of the way that you take care of yourself.
All right.
Okay. TSH, it's below a 2. You are functionally optimal according to your TSH because we want that below a 2. Then we move up to, well, they did total T4, not free, but that's fine. That's not even as important again, because T4 is the inactive hormone. So then we look at the two most important tests here are the free T3, which yours is a 2.5, reference range of 2.3 to 4.2, just for your listeners. And then reverse T3 is a 16.3. This does not change. I don't even care what country you're in. Reverse T3 is always from a 4 to a 5 to like a 25, 26 cutoff. It's always in that same numerical range. Functionally, we want you below a 12. So this is kind of telling us like, hey, your body is not really converting the T4 that you have into T3. And we can see that in your free T3 of a 2.5. I always say I like the free T3 in the upper quadrant of the reference range. And the reason why I say upper quadrant, it can vary from lab to lab in the United States. It can vary from lab to lab if you're talking about different countries. So if you stay in that upper quadrant, meaning for you, your free T3 should be like a 3.7, 3.8 to like a 4.2 or even above. Some people do very, very well with their free T3 above that reference range cutoff. So yes, this is a case of either Hashimoto's with no antibodies showing or subclinical hypothyroidism like we talked about. Now, I hate using the term subclinical because it just makes it almost takes the term hypothyroid and puts it into this, well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't kind of thing. Again, we have to look at labs and ask the person, how do you feel? Now, you already told us the symptoms that you're dealing with. So when we take those symptoms, and listen, Danielle, if you're like, I feel great, I'm fine, I'm at an optimal weight, I'm good, I can control it, I got my blood sugar under control, which I know you do. My energy is fantastic, my hair is long and flowing, I'm amazing. then I would be like, well, we're just going to watch this then, because I'm not going to put you on thyroid medication or replacement therapy and have something go, crazy. But because you have symptoms, I look at these labs from a totally different perspective. And they're showing us that you are low in the active thyroid hormone and that your reverse T3 is kind of bumping up. So for you, I would absolutely say, let's do thyroid hormone replacement therapy because it's going to help your symptoms. There's indicators right here in front of us that there's something going on. You don't have enough of that active thyroid hormone that gives you a metabolism, that gives you energy. Every cell in your body has a receptor site on it for T3. So if there's not enough T3 going around, there are various systems that are going to suffer, like we said earlier. So in this particular instance, when we pair it up with how do you feel, then I would say, yes, there is a need to replace thyroid hormone here. And it's going to really help your symptoms and take you to that next level.
Yeah. So what type of a medication, because you said that traditional doctors, I'm sure if anyone's listening and they're on thyroid meds, I feel like from the little experience I have with this, maybe 85% plus are probably going to be on Synthroid, which is a T4 only medication. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Which we can't do because the only thing that converts to reverse T3 is T4.
So that would not be a good choice for me.
No, the only thing that converts to reverse T3 is T4. So if we give you T4, you're going to get worse because it's going to push that reverse T3 up. So what I would do for you is start you on just a little bit of T3 only, just to nudge that reverse down. Now we can look at the factors that push up reverse T3 and check those boxes to make sure that we're addressing all of those while we address your thyroid. So I have
those are really helpful to hear for sure. So I'm excited to dive into this. Yeah.
And you have to, a lot of practitioners will be like, well, why don't you just address those factors first and don't put her on any thyroid medication and just, address all those factors that are driving up reverse T3 because your free T3 is still low. Now, could it be said that if we bring down the reverse, there will be more conversion of T4 to T3? Yes, absolutely. But when I'm dealing with someone who's really healthy, like if you were coming in and you were 100 pounds overweight and you didn't take care of yourself and you're eating the standard American diet and, and you're nutrient deficient, all of that, then I would say, well, maybe we want to address that first and then retest and see where your labs land. But you're coming to me as a healthy person. So that's different too. This is all these are all the nuances of thyroid treatment. You're coming to me as a really healthy person. You're gluten-free. You're controlling your blood sugar, which high insulin, high blood sugar are one of the biggest causes of elevated reverse T3. So we can check that box for you. Estrogen dominance is another big one. Low iodine status. Underlying infections like Epstein-Barr or mold or heavy metals, any of those can drive up reverse T3 because it's a stressor on the body. And the body is saying like, hey, we need to deal with this like heavy metal toxicity. Let's bring up the reverse T3 because this person doesn't need to lose weight until they deal with the heavy metals or until they deal with the estrogen dominance. Again, there's so many different things that could come into play to drive up reverse T3. In a non-healthy person, I would check all of those boxes first. But for you, I'm going right to treatment because I know we're going to waste a lot of time and you're going to feel miserable as we check all those boxes that are probably already checked.
Yeah. So I definitely, my suspicion is that I do have heavy metals though. So I know that that's something that I also need to address as well. Because my mom had a mouthful of fillings and there was something else. I have MTHFR, so I don't detoxify. So there's I don't detoxify the mercury. So I personally think that I need to do some heavy metal testing and detoxification, but of course you can't do that unless you're really working with a very skilled practitioner. So that is on my list. So would you say that there would still be benefit to supplementing sort of concurrently as you're doing work to address these other things? So maybe you could feel better and have the energy to do all these extra things.
You definitely could. Now, if you were, and I have a lot of patients like this too, that they don't want to go on a prescription medication, and that's totally fine. I do want you to think of thyroid medication as hormone replacement therapy because you're replacing hormones that are no longer being made by your body. And there's no amount of adrenal fixing, gut fixing, whatever, blood sugar fixing that is going to magically produce more T3, right? So sometimes there is a case of we need to replace this. And you're borderline being flagged low, you know, at a 2.5. Yeah, you're borderline there.
Yeah.
So I would say now in this case, I would say what I would do with you, I would use T2 first. T2 is not a prescription. It's in supplement form. And I'll tell you about it. So T2 is 3,5-diodo-L-thyrine. It is just super cool. It's super cool compound when you start diving into the research, which I've done. T2 is produced by your thyroid gland. So we have all the thyroid hormones are T1, 2, 3, and 4. And T2 it's not an inactive form. It does have activity very similar to T3 without the thyromimetic effects, meaning if you take T2 in supplement form, it is not going to start screwing with your thyroid numbers to where your doctor will say you're hyper. It's not going to drive up T3. It's not going to drive up reverse T3. T2 does not convert to reverse. So that's something that we could use because it increases your basal metabolic rate. Number one, that means you're burning more fat at rest. So in human trials, and this thing is it's so amazing. In human trials, in 28 days, we saw 4% body fat reduction. Now that's not 4 pounds, that is 4%, which is a huge body fat reduction in a short amount of time. The other thing that T2 does, it does not burn muscle tissue. So if you hear me talk, I will talk the benefits of T3 all day long. I said earlier, T4 only doesn't work. It doesn't. But some people get a little bit jittery on T3, or they don't want to do medication, or we can't increase their dose because it does tend to have more of a stimulating effect than does T4. So T3 has that thyromimetic effect, meaning it's acting on the thyroid gland. It's acting on the individual cells. It does kind of increase energy a little bit. It's a little bit stimulating. It can increase your heart rate. It can increase your vitals. And in many cases, that's what we want it to do. But if someone is sensitive or they don't want to go on medication, we can use T2 because it doesn't produce that effect. Now, the other downside of T3, it burns fat, but it also burns muscle. And T2 does not burn muscle tissue. It preserves muscle and it only burns body fat. It also hits the mitochondria to produce more ATP. So it's going to increase your energy again without that overstimulating feeling or overstimulating effect. So that is also something that we could do for you. I have it in my product, the Thyroid Fixer, but 3,5-diodo-L-thyrine has been out for decades. I've been using it on myself and with patients for decades, but it was always in like these bodybuilding, angry supplements with like names that the average woman would be like, I'm not going to take, die 5 times lifting weights, supplement, but yeah, it's I've been using it for a long time and it really does work. So that might be the route that we go with you first and see if that doesn't alleviate some symptoms. And then if it doesn't, then we can move on to actual thyroid hormone replacement therapy. But I think I know you will get some effect from the T2 too.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I like hearing all about those. I mean, I didn't know T2 was a thing, but I guess, they started from one. It's just like some vitamins that like don't really exist anymore. They maybe lost their status as a vitamin. So yeah. And the other thing that when you were talking about how, T3 can make people feel a little bit revved up, that's sometimes what the symptoms that people feel when they're working on lowering their insulin levels, balancing their blood sugar levels, all of a sudden they start to feel bad. And they're like, I don't know what it is. I've cut out every supplement. I'm not doing anything in the morning except taking my thyroid med and I feel terrible. I'm like, oh, that's that. Now it's time to talk with your doctor about reducing your dose because you don't need as much. And the other thing that I kind of thought of in terms of symptoms is that one thing I noticed was that when I was intermittent fasting, I would start to get really cold. And I think that to me, that's a symptom of thyroid where it's like, oh, I have high reverse T3. That's a survival sort of signal. And so if I'm putting myself in more of a stress state, which fasting is a stressor, that my body was giving me symptoms of that where it couldn't keep my body temperature up, because your thyroid has to do with keeping your body temperature at a, the normal level, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. And those are some of the vitals that we'll have people take. You can take your vitals, even if you can't get all the labs done, or you're looking for a new doctor because your doctor said no to the labs. You can take your vitals. So as soon as you open your eyes in the morning, take your body temperature, preferably if you can find it. These things are gold, the old mercury thermometers, but at least not a digital one. You got to get the one that you stick under your tongue, and you actually have to wait and be patient and look at the little thing that rises up, not digital. So take your body temp first thing in the morning before you take anything, before you sit up and your feet hit the floor. You take your body temp. Also, take your heart rate. Throw on your Apple Watch or Fitbit, get one of those little pulse ox for your finger, take your heart rate, because chances are you're going to be low, and you're not like a Lance Armstrong in shape athlete low. You're a hypo low. So if you're rolling in with a resting heart rate of 50, that's probably a little bit too low unless you are like some kind of Olympic athlete. So take your body temp, take your heart rate, take your blood pressure, which is also usually low, because think of hypo as low and slow. Everything is low and slow. Your temperature is low. Your heart rate is lower than normal. Your blood pressure is usually low. Now, blood pressure can also be high with hypo because of the regulation. Again, because the thyroid is controlling everything, and blood pressure just gets all crazy and dysregulated. So that might not be as accurate.
Or maybe if that insulin resistance is one of maybe the drivers of the hypo, the high insulin resistance is going to be driving the high blood pressure. And so that would be maybe an exception there.
Yeah, 100. That's why I don't like hanging my hat on the blood pressure. Right. I don't like hanging my head on any of the vitals, because I always share that my body temperature is still 97.1, but I am optimized. I am not going up in medication. I'm not doing anything else. I'm fine. But it's at least it's a kind of a little bit of a feedback loop that if you're coming in at a 95, 96, a 97, that's still too low of a body temperature. And that's going to explain that sensitivity to cold, and being cold while other people are normal and feeling fine. And then that's also going to be data for your doctor to tell you that you are a little bit hypo, because your body temp shouldn't be that low.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it also has me thinking that after I used to always be cold, and then after I did keto and I got fat adapted and probably lowered my insulin, I was able to I feel like I'm not as cold anymore. Like even I'll go home and my mom's like, you're not cold. Like even living in Florida and you come to New York and you're not cold. I'm like,
right.
Surprisingly, no, I'm like, I can tolerate it much better. So I do think that there have been some improvements on that front, but yeah, that's a really great metric to track, and taking those vitals too. So I know we talked a little bit about the insulin resistance. How is it tied to thyroid function? So where does blood sugar and insulin fit in when it comes to thyroid?
So since the thyroid is the master gland controlling everything, the insulin resistance that we see with hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, it can be from the pancreas itself over secreting insulin, or it can be at the cell level of true insulin resistance at the cell. So we're not quite sure. And bottom line is, I don't care. I just want to treat it. So we want to first optimize your thyroid, obviously address your diet, and then use any kind of supplements that we need to lower insulin and blood sugar. I don't know. I can't remember whether we talked about this when you were on my podcast or not, Danny, but berberine is one of my favorite. I just love it for just that regulation. And then you start helping people's cravings, and then you're optimizing their thyroid at the same time. I have a whole theory of both, and we don't do one thing. We do the whole thing at once, because I don't want you suffering for 3 months as we're working on one thing. And then you're like, oh, I still have all these symptoms. Like, let's do it all at the same time. So let's optimize your thyroid and treat the insulin and change your diet. And yeah, it's sometimes with some people, it's a lot at first, But I just tell them it's just so worth it to do all these changes at once. We'll hold your hand. We'll get you there. But you're going to thank me 3 months from now when you're seeing results versus doing one thing at a time. So that's really, I know that's a long answer to a short question, but yes, thyroid, master gland controlling, insulin controlling, blood sugar. Sometimes people are eating like garbage as well. Sometimes we need to use berberine in the mix. It just varies on person to person.
Got it. Yeah, I like that supplement recommendation as well. So there are 3 whammies that you've mentioned before on your podcast when it comes to weight loss resistance. Yep. So these 3 big factors, whether you have this active metabolism or not, where you feel like you're just like, I have a slow metabolism. If I walk past a tray of brownies, I gain 5 pounds. Like I have said that before, like that's how I feel about my metabolism. Like I have to work so hard. And so can you tell us what those are?
Absolutely. And one of them you need to get tested if you haven't already. So
okay.
Number 1, you know what I'm going to say? Yeah. Number 1 is thyroid. So if free T3 is low, like we saw in your labs, that is absolutely going to produce a lower metabolism because everything is low and slow. Remember, hypo, low and slow, that equals your ability to burn fat as well. You need that T3 hormone in the mix and you need that to be adequate. Secondary to that would be insulin resistance, which I see, the double whammy all the time, like low thyroid function, not on proper treatment, doctors saying that you're normal, everything's fine. And oh, look, you have insulin resistance too. And I know with insulin resistance, you and I follow the same kind of functional levels. A person will be told that they're totally fine. And meanwhile, you and I are looking at it going like, you're pre-diabetic. Like, look at these numbers. Oh my God. But yeah, it falls into the standard lab value range. So they told you you're normal. So that's part 2. The third component is low testosterone. Ladies, testosterone is not a dude hormone. You have it and you need it, and you need it at optimal levels too. So testosterone, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. If not, your editor can exit out. It's the get shit done hormone, GSD. It's the GSD hormone. You are not going to do anything if you don't have adequate levels of testosterone. You're not going to want to go to the store. You're not going to want to go to work. You're not going to take the kids to school. You're not going to work out. Like that's the last thing you're going to have motivation to do. You don't want to have sex. You can't build muscle to save your life, and you can't lose weight without adequate amounts of testosterone. So that's that third component. Now, again, coming back to and I know this is mainly focused on thyroid, but let's dig into testosterone just a little bit. On that standard lab value range. Oh, that pisses me off more for males and females with testosterone than pretty much any other lab. I don't care. Yeah, I get it. The TSH goes to 4.5 and we like it below it too. Testosterone, the range for women, I don't know where it starts. You might get cut off if you're less than a 5, but let's just say 0 to 45. Optimal is 50. So I have women saying, well, I have high testosterone. I go, what is it? They're like, it's 51. I'm like, yeah, you're optimal. You're not high. That's actually optimal. But the majority of the time I'm seeing testosterone levels at a 3, at 11, at a 20, at a 30. That's not optimal. And then for guys, I'll just mention them and give them some love. Oh, your range, you guys go from 250 to 1100. I wouldn't let my 76-year-old father be at a 250 or a 300 or a 350. Your optimal range is like 800 to 1,000. But you're not getting any kind of love if you're rolling in at a 350, 400. You're going to be told that you're normal, but you are low testosterone. Same with ladies. So testosterone is that third component. Wow.
That is such great information. And thank you for giving us those lab values. And I can't imagine I can't, as we're talking, what I know, my story, your story, all the information you're telling me, it's just like how poorly served is the population with their health. Like we're being told that it's fine and that our numbers are fine. Like how many times a day do you get messages or people coming to you saying, I got all this lab work. So, the doctor says everything's fine. This is fine. Everything's fine. Like, and it's like, but so something else must be going on. And it's like, it's not the something else. It is this. And we're just being missed because these ranges are just out of control, wrong. I mean, I have that for blood sugar. You have that for thyroid. We have that for hormones. Like I feel like functional practitioners, we are just fighting against these horrible ranges for different lab panels. Like that's all we have to do. And we have to keep sort of re-educating people that, just because it's okay in your blood, sometimes that's not even the best place to test for something like adrenal hormones. It's like, oh, my thyroid, my adrenals are fine because I got a test 1 point in the day and it came back within range.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's kind of like blood sugar. You don't look at it 1 point and know it's okay. We need to see what it's doing, see what the patterns are. So this is just a lesson to just dive deeper, trust your body and trust that intuition. Like you had to go to 7 or 8 doctors to figure out what was wrong with you. I had to do it myself and go to nutritional therapy school and quit my career and have a new career. So we've had to go above and beyond to advocate for our health and to figure out what's wrong. And I keep learning every single day. I'm learning more. I'm learning so much on this interview. I love it. This is not just self-serving. I hope that everyone else, I'm sure you all are getting so much from this as well, but I kind of feel selfish, but I think it's so good for everyone to hear that walk through the panel and all these tests and what these numbers mean. And this is giving us these skills to be like, oh, wow, I need to fire my doctor and work with a functional practitioner. You need to, some of us need to prioritize, well, maybe I can't go on this vacation or I can't, be buying XYZ, and I need to put this money towards paying a practitioner that my insurance isn't going to cover, because the insurance, it's like, why have it if none of the doctors who take the insurance can even give us our answers or help us? So that was just a tangent.
I know. And, I was talking to a friend today and I said, I have insurance for those catastrophic events. If I break an arm, which I did snowboarding once, so yeah, you want to have that insurance, but you also have to realize that that's not going to cover you to get optimized. That really is where functional medicine comes in. And I will also tell your listeners, functional and integrative also does not mean that you are guaranteed to get help with because as you know, Danny, I mean, you've probably run into this too. There are functional and integrated practitioners that don't view blood sugar and insulin resistance the way that you do, but yet you look at them and you go, oh my gosh, you're not serving your patient or your client, because you're not even seeing that they have this issue right here. And you're telling them that they're fine and you're just going to fix their gut. Like, no, even when you get into the integrative and functional realm, you have to look for a specialist. You have to look for a specialist, especially if you have thyroid disorders and you're not being treated properly. Look for a specialist, because there's a lot of functional docs out there. I just did a podcast last week, basically for practitioners. And I really do. Karen and I have toyed around with the idea of doing a practitioner training, because at first when we talked about this a couple of years ago, I was thinking, I'm like, well, these functional, they know what they're doing with thyroid. Oh, no, they don't. I have so many people that have dropped tens of thousands of dollars on other functional practitioners that had no idea what to do with their thyroid and their hormones. So it really is a very nuanced kind of treatment skill when it comes to thyroid and hormones. But yeah, I mean, even functional practitioners, they're like, oh, your TSH is suppressed. I'm like, oh, come on. Like, did you break out your medical textbook at any point in time and see the TSH is a pituitary hormone? Like, come on. So I get frustrated even in the functional realm of these people taking people's money and not treating them properly. So that's my public service announcement to your audience, is also to look for a specialist.
I fully agree with that. I have so many people saying, like, I spent this at my naturopath, and just the advice that they're getting from certain doctors. I was like, oh, good. At least it was this. And I'll look at some of the supplements that they were put on, and I'm just kind of scratching my head. I was like, we just missed this gaping area, or they were told to do something. And, where my advice that I've been successful with many patients or many clients, it was the kind of the complete opposite. So, we don't always have all the answers for every single person, but when you're looking for a practitioner, listen to the things that they talk about, listen to, listen to their podcasts and information that they're sharing about what they would do with different clients and the success stories that they've had. And that might be, a good way. And even just hearing like, oh, wow, this person has been through so much of what I've been through. I think that, so many times people will come to me and be like, your story was my story. And it's good to work with someone who's been through it themselves and who, aligns with you, because you might need some of the same things, or they may have experienced some of those things or seen it in other patients. So I think that that's a great thing as well. So I have one more question for you. Just thinking about one of my clients, very near and dear to my heart, who has no thyroid. And I'm sure that some people listening have no thyroid, and she struggles with weight loss. And I know that she's been on Synthroid forever, and that her doctor says that her numbers look good. And what can you tell us about that? Anything you can do, you can tell us about no thyroid.
Oh yeah. Another pet peeve of mine. So, okay. Basic physiology. You had a thyroid gland. Your thyroid gland produced T4 and T3. It produced the inactive form T4, and it also produced T3. Now, in addition to that, the thyroid gland is the main conversion gland. Now, conversion of T4 to T3 can happen in your gut. It can happen in your liver. It can happen in the peripheral tissues, but the majority of it happens in the thyroid gland itself. So we remove the thyroid gland, follow the logic, and we only replace it with T4. Huh. Okay.
She's going to be hypo, right?
Your thyroid gland produced T4 and T3. We took that out. Your thyroid gland converts T4 to T3. We took that out. Now we're going to give you the inactive thyroid hormone and cross our fingers and wish on a rainbow that it converts somehow. That doesn't even make sense. Every thyroidectomy patient, partial thyroidectomy patient, radioactive iodine patient should be on a combination of T4 and T3. I don't care if that's Armour, NP thyroid, liothyronine, cytomel, Synthroid, tyrosine, levo. I don't care what combo, but T3 better be in there somewhere, or you will never be optimized. Quite frankly, that's borderline medical malpractice, because your liver, I call it a T3ectomy, because you literally stole a T3 from a person and they have no way of getting it back.
That is, I can't wait to share this information with her. I'm going to, obviously, she's an avid listener of the podcast, so she will hear this when it comes out. But thank you so much for sharing that for all the other people who might be struggling, because so my guess is that they will show up hypo because they don't have the T3, and that will give them that hypo presentation. So all those symptoms that we were talking about earlier at the top of the episode, where we were having, symptoms of thyroid issues, some of those might be relatable. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I would have her check her reverse T3, because if she's on T4 only and she doesn't really have a strong ability to convert, then we want to check that reverse T3 and make sure that didn't go up, and then check the free T3. If her doctor is telling her she's normal, then her TSH is most likely suppressed. Now, when you take out a thyroid gland, if it's because of cancer, we want to keep TSH suppressed. Now, I could dump a ton of T4 on you, and it will most likely push down your TSH because of that feedback loop, because you have to think of, if the thyroid gland is kind of doing a search, or the pituitary is doing a search, and it's like, is there enough thyroid hormone in this person's body? Yes. Okay, cool. We don't have to scream at the thyroid. That's TSH going up. When it's screaming and it's saying, hey, thyroid gland, you're not producing enough. Come on, let's go. Let's go. If it goes down and becomes suppressed, it's quiet. It's happy with the situation at hand. It doesn't have to stimulate the thyroid gland that isn't there in her case. So if her doctor is only looking at her TSH, of course it's going to be suppressed, because she's probably on a boatload of T4, but they're not looking at all those other factors.
Oof. Can't wait to share this information, and have a feeling she's going to have to fire her doctor. And I love that rule that you have. I have that. I'm going to have that same rule with people when their doctor does not want to test their insulin.
Yep.
They don't want to test it. And they're like, no, you don't need that. what do you mean you don't need that? Over 88% of people are severely insulin resistant. There's probably about 4% of the population that is healthy, has good insulin. So what do you mean you don't need that? This is a lot of us talking about, these practitioners, but it's coming from a place of, we care so much about our clients and our patients, and we see them experiencing gaslighting and experiencing borderline medical malpractice and poor care, that people just come to us in such a state where they're like, I don't trust any practitioner. I've spent so much money already. No one can give me my answers. And like, that's sad to see someone in a place like that, because it's real. And so I think that some of this anger that I know I personally have towards certain practitioners, or just the system in general, is really coming from a place of, I just wish that, my clients and just people in general were served better and had these answers. So thank you so much for coming on today and giving us, this real thyroid masterclass and deep dive. And I think that this information is going to be so helpful to people. So where can we find out, where can people work with you? Do you take clients? Like, what does that look like? Because I'm sure people are like, I wouldn't hurt to be my thyroid doctor.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So number one, you can hear me speak a ton about this on my podcast, the Thyroid Fixer podcast that Danny was a guest on. So you can go binge listen to that. And then if you're interested in working together, you can go to my website at dramiehornaman.com and click on book a call, book a free discovery call. That's where myself, my team, we're going into kind of your current situation and what have you done that works, and what have you had tested, and what was your doctor telling you? And then we will go over the different programs that you can go into that we think is best for you. So that would be the perfect starting point. I also do have a private Facebook group called Dr. Amie, the Thyroid Fixer, Love Your Mirror, because I want everybody to love their mirror when they look in it. So that group is a ton of information where you get community support, because the people in there, they're answering questions the same way I would answer, because they're so well trained. They followed me for so long that sometimes I'll click on somebody's question and I am there personally answering you. Yes, I am in there. It is not my assistants. It's not bots. I am in there looking at your labs that you post, answering your questions, but I'll click on it and somebody, will answer it. I'm like, what Jessica said. That's exactly it. Yes.
I had that experience in my group today. I was like, well, Sarah, I think I need to hire you. That's great.
You got them well-trained, Danny. So they've heard you so much that they're like super fans, and then they can answer other people. So
absolutely. Perfect. And that's what we want. Like, I want to teach you everything I know, and I'm sure you do too, so that everyone can be their own advocate and the person who's healing themselves, because you all know yourselves best. I know myself best. And so you don't want to outsource your health to someone else. Someone's going to guide you, and you learn this information and you try it and you apply it and you experiment and you tweak and you fix and you bounce ideas off of people you trust. And that's how you find health. It's not through just blindly following things. It's like, I'm just going to take this medication and not learn about this. What if something changes? Like, you really want to know, you want to get really familiar with this. So I'm going to be binge listening to your podcast, because the thyroid, I feel like it was just like blood sugar. It kind of scared me because I didn't understand it. And so the same thing with the thyroid, it's like, God, there's so many of these T hormones. Like, I don't understand this, but I feel like the more I listen to you talk, and just even now, I feel like I have a better understanding of it. I don't have to be afraid of it, even though I don't know it. That's how you learn it. And you can improve your health so much. So thank you so much for being here. And we'll definitely have to have you back on.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Bye-bye.